It's that wonderful time of year again. Time to get a new phone. Whether your contract is up and it's time to upgrade, you're buying you're buying your special someone a new cell phone for Christmas, whether it's boyfriend, girlfriend, uncle, aunt, child, dog, whatever for Christmas, you're getting them a new cell phone, or you're just one of the more unfortunate ones and you somehow manage to drop it in the toilet bowl or drop it on the sidewalk and shatter it to pieces. Well, one thing's for sure, you gotta go to the phone store and get a phone. Well, one thing is for sure, you want a good phone, and you're gonna make sure you're gonna walk out of the phone store with a good phone, and you feel he or she deserves a good phone. Well, when you walk into the store, you may feel overwhelmed because there's so many different models, so many different makes. You're, it's a little, it's a little overwhelming. But in all reality, it comes down to one decision: whether you prefer iPhone or whether you prefer Android. Well, you see, a lot of times you'll go out and you'll see a lot of people using iPhones, but don't let that fool you. Competitors are persuading consumers to buy inferior devices. And the biggest example is Apple. Yep, I said it. But it's the truth. In the big picture here is that Android is better than iPhone and should be chosen over them. And I'll give you a few reasons why. Let's start with cost. The cost is probably the biggest thing you're focusing on. How much are you going to lose and how much are you going to gain here, right? Right. Well, iPhones, you see them now for maybe $700 to $1,000. If you're not on a budget, then yeah, maybe that's okay. Maybe that's fine. Maybe that doesn't bother you. But if you are, that's a huge devastation to your bank account. You could get a pretty decent Android phone that does everything you want it to do for maybe $200 or even less. Now let's talk about durability. One of the biggest problems with iPhones is how even with a case they lack in durability. If you drop an iPhone on the hardwood floor or on cement, there's a good chance, even sometimes with the case, that it'll shatter or the screen will break or it'll start malfunctioning once you pick it up and try to use it again. That's no fun. Well, you see, a lot of Androids are designed to handle most environments and be more accident proof, if you will. So, with a case or without a case, a lot of times, if you drop it, nothing will happen. You can pick it up and resume using it again as normal. Now let's talk about availability. If you want iOS, which is the operating system that comes in all iPhones, you're gonna have to go with Apple. You can only get a proper version of iOS if you buy an Apple device, whether it's an iPad, iPhone, I was gonna say Apple Watch, but actually that's actually an entirely separate operating system. But anyways, my point is with Android can be found on so many different devices, made by so many different manufacturers such as Samsung, Motorola, Google, LG, or Asus. And it's not even just phones you'll find Android on. You'll find them on watches, you'll find it on tablets, you'll find it on your TV. Android is everywhere. See, Android is what is called open source software, meaning commercial manufacturers can take it, modify it to make it their own, and resell it for profit. That's why, even though all these different manufacturers sell their phones with Android on their devices, it all looks different with every phone because Android is slightly modified with each different phone. Now, accessibility. iPhone's iOS is very closed, very restrictive. You can't really go too deep into it. You're really restricted to simply doing the basics. Playing apps, playing music, texting, calling, and you really can't go too deep with many of the settings either. It took them a very long time for them to even introduce a file system that you could access, and even that's restrictive. Android, they've always had a file system. You could go as deep into an Android as you could with any desktop PC using Windows or Linux. It happens a lot with Mac OS too. It's the bottom line with Apple operating systems is they're all very restrictive. And if you really want to, do some heavy modification, you're out of luck. Moving on, let's talk about design. One thing that Apple does have going for themselves a little bit is design. They all look very sleek. They all look very fancy. They look very attractive to consumers. However, one thing that Apple did to the design of their phones that really made them fall on their face was removing the headphone jack. It was probably the biggest mistake they have ever made. Probably one of the worst decisions for their future products. Because of the removal of the headphone jack, loads of different adapters are needed to even accomplish some of the simplest tasks. For an iPhone, you need an adapter to simply listen to music with wired headphones now. I mean, if you have Bluetooth earbuds, it's not a problem. But if you like if you like the wired life, not much you can really do unless you have an adapter. Luckily, most phones come with adapters now, but it's still a hassle, and it just doesn't look good. Now, unfortunately, some Android manufacturers have followed in Apple's footsteps, such as Motorola. They have also removed their headphone jack, and they require adapters for the use of their devices. Well, fortunately, Motorola seems to be the only one who has done this. Manufacturers like Samsung have done the smart thing and kept their headphone jack. And, not to mention, even though Apple kind of started the whole full-screen phone trend, Samsung and other Android manufacturers really execute the idea a whole lot better. On iPhones, it just doesn't really look as good. It doesn't, they got the full screen on the iPhone X, and there's that big notch on the top. It doesn't really look that good. Whereas with Samsung and other people using the whole full screen thing, it's like it's one perfect rectangle with maybe just little gaps on the ends where there's no screen. But overall, the idea just looks better on their phones. Now, in summary, if you want the better phone, go with Android. It looks better, it's tougher, it's cheaper, it's everything you would want it to be as a consumer. So, when you're considering going to get a new phone from the phone store, whether as a gift or for yourself, make the smart choice and go with Android. I'm Jesse Rogalski, and I heavily approve of this message. Have a good night.